Undercover CEO pretends to be poor to test employees, then discovers the shocking truth. Imagine walking into a place where you've built your dreams, poured your heart and soul into every detail, only to be completely ignored. That's exactly what happened to Nathan Carter, a self-made millionaire and the founder of one of the most prestigious restaurant chains in the country. But here's the twist. Nathan wasn't dressed in his usual tailored suit or wearing the watch that costs more than most people's cars. Instead, he walked in wearing faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a hoodie, looking like someone who might not even belong there. What he discovered over the next few hours would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone working at Carter's table. The story begins on a quiet Friday evening, with soft jazz playing in the background and the clinking of wine glasses filling the air. The restaurant buzzed with well-dressed patrons, chatting effortlessly, their laughter blending seamlessly with the hum of fine dining. It was the kind of atmosphere that screamed exclusivity, a place where money talked and appearances mattered. And yet, when Nathan stepped inside, no one so much as glanced his way. At first, it felt surreal. He knew this restaurant like the back of his hand. After all, he had spent decades building it from scratch. From washing dishes in Atlanta to running Michelin-starred kitchens, Nathan had defied every stereotype about black men in the culinary world. But tonight, standing unnoticed near the entrance, he realized something unsettling. The business he worked so hard to create didn't recognize him anymore. Or rather, it refused to see him. What made this moment even more painful was the subtle disdain he encountered. Hostesses exchanged polite smiles with wealthy couples while ignoring him entirely. Servers zipped past without making eye contact, their trays gliding smoothly toward tables, occupied by guests who looked the part. Even Jessica Langhart, the polished hostess, known for her charm, gave him a dismissive once-over before suggesting they were fully booked, despite 2 empty tables sitting right in plain sight. For Nathan, these weren't just minor oversights. They were signs of a deeper issue festering within his own empire, an issue he couldn't ignore any longer. As Nathan took a seat in the corner, deliberately choosing a spot where he could observe without being noticed, he reflected on how things had changed. Complaints had started trickling in months ago, reviews mentioning poor treatment, tweets hinting at discrimination. Most shocking were the stories from working-class diners who said they'd been turned away under the guise of reservations only. Policies. One complaint haunted him in particular. A son recounting how he'd saved up for months to take his mother out for her birthday, only to leave humiliated because the staff treated them like they didn't belong. These accounts gnawed at Nathan's conscience. He hadn't fought his way up just to create another space where people had to prove they were worthy. If Carter's table had become that kind of place, then it wasn't just a business problem. It was personal. So here he was, undercover, testing his own staff to uncover the truth. Dressed down and stripped of the trappings of wealth, Nathan wanted to experience firsthand what many of his customers claimed they faced daily. Would his employees treat him with kindness, or would they judge him based solely on his appearance? As he sat there, stomach growling from hunger, he couldn't help but feel invisible, and that was precisely the point. This wasn't just an experiment. It was a wake-up call. Every glance, every whispered comment, every cold shoulder reinforced the weight of bias and privilege that permeated his establishment. But amidst the indifference, something unexpected happened. A young waitress named Alicia Brown stepped forward when no one else would. When Nathan was told there were no available tables, Alicia intervened, insisting he be seated despite protests from her manager. Her act of defiance came at a cost. Nathan saw the disapproving looks, heard the murmurs behind closed doors, but she stood her ground anyway. Later, she brought him a bowl of soup on the house, a small gesture that spoke volumes about her character. In that moment, Nathan realized this wasn't just about exposing flaws in his system. It was also about recognizing the heroes, quietly fighting against them. Yet, as the night unfolded, tensions escalated. Brian Coleman, the general manager, confronted Alicia about wasting time on a table that barely counted as a customer. His words carried the sharp edge of condescension, a reminder of the unspoken rules governing places like Carter's Table. Watching this unfold, Nathan felt a mix of anger and guilt. Anger at the way power was wielded to silence those who dared to challenge the status quo, and guilt for allowing such toxicity to fester unchecked. By the end of the evening, Nathan knew one thing for certain. Changes needed to happen, starting with the people calling the shots. Fast forward to the next day, and the scene shifts dramatically. This time, Nathan walks in, wearing a navy blue suit that commands respect before he even speaks. The same staff who ignored him yesterday now scramble to accommodate him, their polished smiles returning in full force. But Nathan isn't interested in apologies or excuses. With calm determination, he addresses the room, recounting his experience from the previous night and calling out the hypocrisy he witnessed. Then, in a move that shocks everyone, including Alicia, he hands her a card, promoting her to general manager effective immediately. Meanwhile, Brian is fired on the spot, leaving jaws dropped and whispers spreading through the restaurant. But the real question remains: will these changes stick? Can a culture rooted in elitism and exclusion truly transform overnight? As Nathan leaves the restaurant, the air feels lighter, but the tension lingers. Alicia stands holding the card, unsure if she's ready for the responsibility thrust upon her. And somewhere in the shadows, former employees like Brian are plotting their next move. The battle for Carter's Table has only just begun, and its outcome will determine whether Nathan's vision of inclusivity can survive in a world obsessed with appearances. The weight of Nathan's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and unrelenting. Alicia stood frozen, her fingers gripping the small business card as if it might vanish at any moment. Around her, the staff shifted uncomfortably, some whispering behind cupped hands, others avoiding eye contact altogether. For years they had operated under Brian's leadership, a man who prided himself on maintaining an image of exclusivity, even if it meant turning away people who didn't fit the mold. Now, with one swift decision, Nathan had dismantled that system, replacing it with something raw, unpredictable, and deeply personal. Alicia's mind raced. She thought about all the times she'd seen customers dismissed or ignored because they didn't look right. She remembered the young couple last month, college students celebrating graduation, who were told there was no room despite 3 empty tables. She remembered the elderly woman clutching a coupon for a free dessert, only to be brushed off by Jessica with a tight smile and vague promises. And now here she was, holding a promotion that felt less like a reward and more like a responsibility, too big to carry. Could she really step into Brian's shoes and change the culture of Carter's Table? Or would the same biases creep back in, disguised as professionalism? Meanwhile, Brian's face burned red beneath his practiced composure. He clenched his fists, his polished exterior cracking under the weight of humiliation. Years of climbing the corporate ladder, perfecting his demeanor, building connections, all undone in a single sentence. As he gathered his belongings from his office, anger simmered inside him. This wasn't over. He couldn't let it be. Brian knew how these places worked. This wasn't just about food or service. It was about power. Power that he believed belonged to people like him. Polished, controlled, untouchable. Nathan's stunt felt like a betrayal, not just of Brian, but of everything Carter's table supposedly stood for. Nathan watched silently as Brian left, slamming the door harder than necessary. It was satisfying, yes, but it wasn't enough. Firing Brian was symbolic, a message sent loud and clear. But fixing what was broken required more than removing one bad actor. The real challenge lay ahead, reshaping the mindset of everyone who walked through those doors. From servers to chefs to hosts. Change wouldn't come easily. People resisted it, especially when it challenged their comfort zones. But Nathan was determined. After spending decades proving himself in an industry that often dismissed him outright, he understood better than anyone what it meant to fight for respect. As the evening wore on, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some employees welcomed the shift, relieved to finally see accountability. Others resented it, muttering under their breath about favoritism or misplaced loyalty. Jessica, in particular, struggled to reconcile her actions the night before with the new reality unfolding around her. She had always considered herself professional, polite even. Yet standing at the host stand, watching Nathan interact warmly with patrons in sneakers and hoodies, she couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her conscience. Had she been part of the problem without realizing it? Was she complicit in creating a space where kindness came second to appearances? For Alicia, the pressure mounted quickly. Her first day as general manager tested her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. A wealthy investor arrived unexpectedly, demanding a private dining area, usually reserved for VIPs. When Alicia informed him it was already booked for a family reunion, he scoffed, insisting she make an exception. The look in his eyes said it all. He expected her to bend, to prioritize status over fairness. But Alicia held firm, channeling the same quiet authority she'd shown the night Nathan sat unnoticed in the corner. "We honor our reservations," she said calmly, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her chest. The investor stormed out, leaving whispers of discontent rippling through the staff. Nathan observed quietly from the sidelines, impressed yet wary. Alicia was doing exactly what he hoped she would, standing up for integrity, but he knew backlash was inevitable. Already, rumors swirled among employees, questioning whether she deserved the promotion. Some accused her of playing favorites, while others whispered about nepotism, convinced her act of defiance had earned her special treatment. Even Jessica, once dismissive of Alicia's role, began treating her with cautious deference, unsure whether to resent or respect her newfound authority. Amidst the chaos, Nathan found himself reflecting on his own journey. He thought about the countless kitchens where he'd scrubbed dishes late into the night, dreaming of a place where excellence wasn't defined by privilege. He thought about the critics who doubted his abilities, the investors who questioned his vision, the customers who assumed he couldn't possibly belong. Each obstacle had fueled his determination, pushing him closer to success. But success alone hadn't brought peace. True fulfillment came from knowing he'd created something meaningful, not just another exclusive restaurant, but a space where everyone could feel valued. And yet, doubts lingered. What if the changes weren't enough? What if old habits re-emerged, hidden beneath smiles and polished service? These questions haunted him as he prepared for the biggest test yet, unveiling Carter's table's newly revised mission statement. Gone were the rigid rules dictating dress codes and reservation policies. In their place stood a simple promise: hospitality without judgment. It was bold, perhaps naive. But Nathan believed wholeheartedly in its potential. If executed properly, it could redefine not just his restaurant, but the entire dining experience. The grand reveal came during peak dinner service. Patrons filled every table, their conversations blending seamlessly with the hum of activity in the kitchen. Nathan stepped onto a small platform near the bar, clearing his throat to address the room. All eyes turned toward him, curiosity mingling with apprehension. He spoke plainly, his words cutting through the noise. "Tonight marks a new chapter for Carter's Table," he began. "From this point forward, we will serve every guest with the same level of care, regardless of appearance, background, or status. Our goal isn't perfection, it's humanity." His announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded enthusiastically, thrilled by the idea of inclusivity. Others exchanged skeptical glances, wondering how such ideals could translate to reality. Back in the kitchen, chefs debated the practicality of serving high-end cuisine without prioritizing wealthier clientele. Out front, servers grappled with balancing efficiency with empathy. Every corner of the restaurant buzzed with uncertainty, anticipation, and hope. But the true test arrived sooner than anyone expected. A group of construction workers walked in, still wearing dusty boots and hard hats, asking for a table. Their presence immediately drew stares, hushed comments, and nervous glances from staff. Alicia approached them with a warm smile, guiding them to a booth near the window. "Welcome to Carter's Table," she said sincerely. "Can I get you started with drinks?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Would this work? Could Carter's Table truly transform, overnight, shedding decades of elitism for something authentic and inclusive? As the workers settled in, laughing and ordering hearty meals, the answer began to take shape, not perfectly, not effortlessly, but with undeniable progress. And somewhere in the midst of it all, Nathan watched, knowing the hardest battles were still ahead. The room was silent, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest, making it hard to breathe. Alicia stood frozen, the card in her hand, feeling heavier with each passing second. Around her, the staff exchanged uneasy glances, some in disbelief, others in quiet admiration. Brian's dismissal had been swift, almost surgical, but its impact rippled through the restaurant like a shockwave. For years, he had been the face of authority here, the one who decided who belonged and who didn't. Now, he was just another man walking out the door, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor as if protesting. His exit. Nathan turned back to the room, his expression calm but resolute. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, his voice steady. "But it starts today. From this moment forward, Carter's Table isn't about exclusivity. It's about connection. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the same level of care, the same respect. That's not negotiable." His words hung in the air, simple yet profound, cutting through decades of unspoken rules and assumptions. Alicia finally found her voice. "You're putting a lot of trust in me," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "What if I mess up?" Nathan smiled faintly. "You already proved you won't," he replied. "Last night, when no one else would stand up for me, you did. That tells me everything I need to know. It wasn't just about the soup or the table by the window. It was about the courage to challenge the system, even when it felt impossible. And now, Alicia was being asked to carry that same courage into a leadership role. As the evening wore on, the energy in the restaurant shifted. Word spread quickly among the staff. Brian was gone. Alicia was the new general manager. And Nathan meant every word he'd said about inclusivity. Some employees embraced the change immediately, their relief palpable. Others hesitated, unsure how to navigate this new reality. Jessica, in particular, struggled to reconcile her actions from the previous night with the expectations now set before her. She approached Alicia tentatively during a lull in service. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean—" Her words trailed off, but Alicia understood. "It's not about what you meant," Alicia said gently. "It's about what you do next." Over the following weeks, Carter's table transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The dress code policy disappeared, replaced by a simple promise: hospitality without judgment. Hosts were trained to greet every guest with genuine warmth, regardless of appearance. Servers learned to prioritize kindness over convenience, even when it meant going the extra mile for someone who didn't fit the old mold. And Alicia, she became a force to be reckoned with, leading by example and holding everyone accountable, including herself. One evening, months later, Nathan returned to the Chicago location unannounced. He stepped inside wearing jeans and a hoodie, much like he had that fateful night. This time, however, the reaction was different. Jessica greeted him warmly, escorting him to a table near the window without hesitation. A server, a young man named Marcus, whom Alicia had personally mentored, brought him a glass of water and a menu, treating him with the same attentiveness he showed every other guest. As Nathan looked around the room, he saw laughter, conversation, and connection. People from all walks of life sat side by side, sharing meals and stories. It was exactly what he'd envisioned. When Alicia spotted him, she walked over with a smile. "So, how are we doing tonight?" she asked, her tone light but curious. Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "Better than I could have hoped," he admitted. "You've done something special here, Alicia. Something real." She shook her head modestly. "We did it together," she said. "All of us." As the night drew to a close, Nathan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Change hadn't been easy. It never was. But it had been worth it. The complaints had stopped, replaced by glowing reviews, praising not just the food, but the atmosphere. Employees who once felt stifled now thrived under Alicia's leadership, and guests who had once been turned away now returned again and again, not because they wanted to prove anything, but because they felt welcome. In the end, Carter's Table wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a reminder that true success wasn't measured by accolades or profits, but by the lives it touched. Nathan had spent his career building an empire, but it wasn't until he dismantled it piece by piece that he truly understood its purpose. Hospitality wasn't about perfection. It was about humanity. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could create the biggest waves of change. As Nathan left the restaurant that night, he paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow over tables filled with laughter and conversation. Somewhere in the kitchen, a chef plated a dish with precision, while out front, a server poured wine with a genuine smile. It was a scene he'd dreamed of for years, one he'd fought tirelessly to create. Tonight, it felt complete.